To understand the rulers and their goals, you have to understand their history, and you have to be able to read their secret signs in which they communicate. The origins of the ruling caste that is reigning over the world goes back to ancient times. In ancient Egypt, there were once two competing pharaoh kingdoms, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. The pharaohs saw themselves as descendants of the sun god. That's why they only married each other so that they won't mix with non-godly beings. Their royal houses were called the White House and the Red House, because one had a white crown and the other had a red crown. The two kingdoms were always at war with each other, but one day they made an alliance. They combined their two kingdoms and also combined the two crowns into one red-white double crown and promised each other to conquer the world together. Because they only procreated within their own family, that resulted in genetic malformation and their offspring was not viable. Out of the necessity to crossbreed with others, an insidious strategy of infiltrating other peoples arose. They crossbreed with the enemy people, which after 5 generations leads to them being indistinguishable from them and thus unrecognizable as strangers. Then they take over the power structures of this people, government, religion, media, and so on, and weaken and destroy them from within. The rulers and all crucial positions of power are occupied by their relatives, and so they have full control over society. In order to recognize each other, they use a multitude of secret signs. One of these signs, for example, is the obelisk. It stands for the phallus, the center core of their strategy. On a side note, a genetic feature of the pharaohs is often a very hairy chest with men. The very first victim of this strategy were the Hebrews. Remember the Bible where the Pharaoh enslaved the Jews and killed their children? The Jews became completely infiltrated and controlled, wherefore they were since perceived by the other peoples as the origin of many conspiracies. Under the cloak of the Jews, the pharaohs conspired and step by step pushed forward their plans for world domination. And later the Jewish diaspora spread the pharaohs all over the world. In Europe they founded knightly and religious orders like the Maltese Order, the Hospitaller, the Jesuits, or the Knight Templars. Their power structures secured them the position as the ruling caste, namely the nobility. So the nobility are the descendants of the pharaohs, who are the monarchs, the knights, and other important high figures in society. The banking system and taxation also have their roots in these structures. They enforce their cross-breeding strategy by law too. The nobility had the so-called ius primae noctis, droit du seigneur, which allowed the seigneur to sleep with every bride in their honeymoon night. This way the family genes of the pharaohs spread far. According to DNA analyses, over 50% of the population of Switzerland are related to them. To protect themselves, the nobility built castles and palaces from where they could reign well protected and where their treasures were safe. The military were knights and mercenaries. Castles also usually had torture chambers, which basically did the same thing that the secret services are doing nowadays. Make people disappear and gather information. And from these power structures the kingdoms arose, which later became the national states. You can still see the 3 colors of the pharaohs in many national flags, the so-called tricolor, red and white for the 2 kingdoms, and blue for the pharaonic war crown. This is also where the term blue-blooded for nobility comes from. Of course, there were many more descendants of the pharaohs than positions for ruling a kingdom. Who should be the ruler then? That went according to an old law of descendants called the primogeniture. That is the right of the firstborn to succession and heritage. All other descendants go away empty-handed and have no right to the throne. That resulted in inheritance disputes, even murders and poisonings within the family. And to avoid that, the non-heirs were put into monasteries. So the descendants who weren't going to be a monarch became knights and monks in the monasteries. And they lived a life of poverty in the beginning. Dissatisfied with their relatively poor conditions compared to their relatives, they got together to organize a great raid. They spread Christian propaganda with the Europeans and together with them attacked the Orient. They robbed the treasures of Jerusalem and brought them to their new treasury, Switzerland. Swiss is Egyptian and means Sister Isis. The last crusade was on May 18, 1291, and there the last bastion of the Templars fell in the Battle of Acre. 2 months later, Switzerland was founded. Co-ordinated with the monarchs in the region, they brought their loot into Switzerland and left the European mercenaries back in the Orient where they were massacred. Their wives, who remained unprotected in Europe, were persecuted using the hammer of the witches, a Swiss book to persecute women who spread conspiracy theories about the Crusades. Even today this is still celebrated in Switzerland on the 1st of August by symbolically burning a stake. Since then, Switzerland acts as a neutral basis, a secure treasury, think of the banks, and will never be touched by any wars. The instruments of world domination are also based there, like the UN, the WHO, the Olympic Games, FIFA, CERN, and so on. As said before, the pharaonic nobility is one family, and if there was ever a problem between monarchs, they would meet in Switzerland, in the neutral Zion, where they would hold peace talks. This is also where the Bilderberger meetings originated from, where strategies are planned and conflicts are discussed. The Old World Order is the feudal system, the reign of the pharaohs, especially their firstborns, as monarchs of the countries of the world. But this order also caused a couple of problems. Firstly, the already mentioned violent inheritance disputes, but another problem was that the kings were competing against each other and waged wars, where they would normally just let the peasants fight each other, but because these wars were getting bigger and more destructive, they would destroy the beauty and order of the world, so the nobility thought up a different order. Another factor in this was that the people more and more realized that the monarchs were organizing the wars and were exploiting the people and thus rebel against the monarchy. So there had to be a different order. And this New World Order is the reign of the pharaohs from the shadows of Freemasonic lodges. The Freemasons are the secret networks of the pharaonic nobility, symbolized, among other things, by the pyramid with the eye. Through propaganda, the Freemasons fueled the angry mood against the monarchy. If they don't have bread, why don't they eat cake instead? And triggered the French Revolution. After that, Napoleon officially abolished the nobility, and as a side note, put up a lot of obelisks everywhere. On May 1st, 1776, the Illuminati were founded, and then the USA. The New World, so America, became the base of the New World Order. The New World Order is based on the 3 principles of the Freemasons: liberty, equality, and fraternity. That refers to the nobility, not the people. It means that all pharaohs are brothers and shall not kill each other. They are all equal, so not only the firstborn has the right to rule. They are all free to get elected as a leader by the slave people. The most convincing of them may become king for 4 or 5 years, so one legislative period. Here's a funny side note. The word parliament is said to come from French from the two verbs parler and mentir, to speak and to lie. The candidates standing for election are always the pharaonic nobility. As a schoolgirl in America showcased, all American presidents but one are related to Barack Obama. That is so because they are all nobility, and the European nobility are all one family or bloodline. The monarchs in Europe only marry one another, just like the pharaohs in ancient Egypt. Of course, parasitic rule over society has a lot of negative consequences. And from these, a wish arises within the masses for a general bettering of the situation. Therefore, the pharaohs thought up various ideologies and systems: nationalism, communism, national socialism, liberalism, democracy, and so on. These are all constructs by the pharaonic rulers. The leaders of these systems are always controlled by the same ruling caste. And globalism, that is basically the united world domination by the pharaohs under one system. To this day, the descendants of the pharaohs enjoy showing the cult objects of their ancestors, like pyramids, obelisks, or Egyptian gods. And to being able to read these symbols, let's have a look at them. Welcome to the second part of the video. In the first part, we took a look at the rulers and their history. And now in the second part, let's look at their secret signs. Let's begin in ancient Egypt and with the pharaohs. The two pharaonic kingdoms, Upper and Lower Egypt, are represented by the two colors of red and white, which were derived from the colors of the pharaonic crowns. Here we see both crowns, the Lower Egyptian red crown and the Upper Egyptian white crown. They stand for the red house and the white house. These are the pharaonic royal houses. At the bottom you see the double crown. After forming an alliance, the two crowns merged into this double crown of red and white. But there was also a third crown, which was only put on during the war, the blue pharaonic war crown. This is how it looked. This is also where the idea for the UN blue helmets comes from. And that is also the reason why the regular American flag, the civil flag, has only white and red, and the war flag has blue on it. Blue stands for the war. These three colors, red, white, and blue, are the origin of the tricolor, which you will find in many national flags. Then another side note about the pharaohs of the Bible who were swallowed by the sea. It's not meant literally like the ocean, but that means that they disappeared into the sea of the peoples through the crossbreeding strategy. Alright, then we have the pyramids. The pyramid is of course a symbol of the pharaonic rule of Egypt. Here we have the glass pyramid in France in the Louvre. This one here is in the USA in Las Vegas with a sphinx and an obelisk. And this one is in the USA in Memphis, which by the way is an Egyptian city name. And here's one in Karlsruhe, Germany. And this is a small one in a garden of a Swiss monastery. And the pyramid also exists as a house decoration. For example, this here shows pyramid followers, and here it's all over the door frame. And this house here is really full of pyramids. It cannot be any more blatant. Then we have the obelisk. An obelisk is a stone sculpture that consists of a long square prism that tapers upwards and has a pyramid on top of it. This pyramid often comes in a different color, or it can also be shiny. The obelisk stands for the Egyptian god of fertility and masculinity. It shows the circumcised phallus. The smaller tip is the circumcision, an old pharaonic tradition. The god of fertility is also the god of death. His name is Osiris, and in hieroglyphs he is written with a single eye. There's also another fertility god called Amun. His hieroglyph is the obelisk. The obelisk also stands allegorically for the strategy of genetic infiltration, which uses the phallus as a weapon. The obelisk, representing masculinity or Osiris, often comes together with a water symbol, which stands for femininity or the goddess Isis. That can be a pool of water or a fountain, for example. The obelisk is also used as a gravestone for pharaohs. Here we see a Jewish cemetery with many obelisk graves. And here, in contrast to that, the Hebrew graves with those little stones on top. Let's look at some examples. Here we see Washington, D.C., the capital, and in the back the obelisk. And here we see a model for the city Germania from the Third Reich. You see a pool of water and two obelisks, but there are also small versions of obelisks. Here we see an obelisk as a fountain with a bud on top, and here's an obelisk with a globe on top and a basin. Here's another obelisk, and in the back you see the triangle of the Freemasons. Here's another obelisk with a globe and a basin. Then here's an obelisk with a globe on top and the Federation symbol. This obelisk stands on 4 spheres. The 4 spheres at the 4 corners of the bottom side of the pyramid stand for the 4 elements: water, fire, air, and earth. Here we see 2 obelisks at the top of a building. They're also at church rooftops. And here are some at a church tower. And here we have 4 obelisks at the entrance to the Embassy of the Vatican. Next, let's take a look at the sun hieroglyph. The pharaohs are sun worshippers after all. Here you see the sun god Ra, and also called Ri or Re. Above his head you see the sun symbol, and written as a hieroglyph it looks like this, like a circle with a point in the middle. But the symbolism in architecture is usually this one, so an encircled circle. Oftentimes you see this one with rays coming from the middle. This can look like a wheel or even sometimes like a flower. And these are also used halved or quartered as like a decoration at the side or on top of something. And here we see a sun hieroglyph that is carved into a rectangle block. You often see these under windows, and this is a vertical version of it. And sometimes you can see these angled versions of it at more modern architecture. You see here the A is written like a triangle, like a pyramid. And then when we take a look at the door, we see the sun hieroglyph carved into this door. The sun hieroglyph means that sun worshippers are living here, and that you should buy here, so invest your money here. And at buildings, this is also a symbol of protection. So at wartime, that the pharaohs know that this house is not supposed to be destroyed because their own people live here. Here we see the sun hieroglyph under a window. Here as well. It often comes inside of an arch, and you often see it as a window too. Or you can see it as a decoration. For example, you can see here as a fireball. Or more minimalistic like this. This is more like a hole. Or like I mentioned before, it can look like a flower, like this. Here you see a door with a sun hieroglyph as a flower. Here we see a horizontal one over a shop window. And here we see a vertical one next to a shop window. And here we see it again on a door. Now let's take a look at the Egyptian goddess Isis. Isis is the goddess of birth and is written with a half circle as a hieroglyph. Here are some statues that show Egyptian images of Isis. There are 2 horns and a sun above her head. And we have these peculiar straight wings, which were probably the inspiration for the imperial eagle of the Third Reich. The Egyptian gods later merged with the Greek gods, and the Egyptian goddess Isis merged with the Greek goddess Persephone. And so a new style of Isis statues arose, which shows a woman in robes carrying a jar and an instrument. The jar seems to be most relevant. The instrument is an Egyptian sistrum. Here you see some modern Isis statues. It's basically a woman in robes with a jar. And here is Isis on an ancient coin. Next we have the Egyptian god of wind and fertility, Amun. Amun like in Tutankhamun. He is also known under the names Amon, Ammon, Hammon, Mammon, or Amen. In hieroglyphs his name is written like an obelisk. Here you see his image as a statue. Above his head is a long symbol. Here we see an ancient statue of Amun, which was partly destroyed. The wind and fertility god Amun also stands for a lack of restraint, wastefulness, and greed. His heraldic animal is the bull. That is also the origin of the bull that stands in front of the stock market. He is specifically mentioned in the Bible as a god that should not be worshipped. That is also where the biblical symbol of the golden calf comes from. Under this god there were also human sacrifices. The churchly term Amen, which allegedly means so be it, is actually a reference to this god. Then we have the Egyptian goddess of justice and wisdom, Ma'at, who later merged with the Greek god Themis and the Roman god Justitia. That is the same figure. Here we see an Egyptian statue of Ma'at. She has a sort of feather on the head, and she has wings that she holds like a U form. In this standing form, she is holding 2 jars in a balance like a scale. And we see something similar in the Greek and Roman version. Here you see Themis with the scales in the one hand and the sword in the other. This image is quite well known. The impartial measuring and the sword for the possible punishment. And here we see Justitia. It's hardly different from the Greek image. Here she is with the sun crown and a Templar cross sword. And here we see her in the triangle of the Freemasons. It's a bit hard to see from this angle. There are also some other statues next to her. By the way, one thing I've noticed is that if you write Ma'at in hieroglyphs, there's this symbol. Don't you think it looks a bit like a German building? I think it might have been the inspiration for the Brandenburg Gate. Then we have this symbol. It's the binding. It shows a rope or a cloth bound together, mostly hanging from the sides. The meaning is the federation of the two pharaoh kingdoms. They are bound together, connected, and allied against the rest of the world. The rope does not have to be short, it can also be long, depending on the type of architecture it decorates. You also see it on top of the Brandenburg Gate at the quadriga. And here you have a world domination symbol, a pillar with a sphere on top, and at the side you see the binding. This is how the world domination symbol looks like. It is basically a pillar or an obelisk with a sphere on top. Generally, the sphere represents the globe which they wish to rule over. Then let's look at the lily. You have probably seen the symbol before. The lily is usually associated with the French monarchy or monarchy in general. But this flower is actually a coded symbol from ancient Egypt. It actually shows the shape of a queen bee upside down. The upper part is the torso and the lower part is the head. The sides are the wings. The queen bee is a symbol of monarchy, of one ruling over many. Then next let's look at the Eye of Horus. Horus is the Egyptian god of light. Here you see him. He basically looks like a man with a bird's head, and he's wearing the double crown of the pharaohs. And this is the hieroglyph representing his eye. I'm not sure about the exact meaning of the Eye of Horus. I've read that it stands for the moon, and if you mirror it, it is the Eye of Ra, which stands for the sun. Otherwise, there are also whole videos about the Eye of Horus representing a part of the brain, the pineal gland, and what you can do with it. I don't want to go into that. There are whole videos about that, and if you're interested, you can research that by yourself. Anyway, the single or also the third eye is a symbol you see used a lot, and it could refer to that. Also, Osiris is written in hieroglyphs with a single eye, a normal eye, however. Alright, before leaving ancient Egypt, let's look at some terms derived from Old Egyptian. The most important word is Sa. Sa means king or pharaoh. So whoever is Sar is a pharaoh or a descendant of the pharaohs. You probably heard the word sarcophagus before. That's a king's grave. That's also where the word coffin comes from. You also find it in the word Caesar, which later turned into Kaiser, which is German for emperor. In England, if you become knighted, then you become a Sir or Sire. The English royal family is called Windsor. In Russia, the ruler was called the Tsar. In France, you might know the politician Sarkozy. Or do you know the old Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar? This is all the same word. Tsar shows you the bloodline of the pharaohs. Then let's look at some more words that were derived from Old Egyptian. Swiss comes from Suis, which comes from Sui Isis, which means Sister Isis. Then we have Israel. It comes from the gods Isis, Isis, and Ra, and L probably stands for all, because Osiris is also the god of entirety. Then we have America. A means big or pregnant. If a woman is pregnant, she becomes big. That's where it comes from. Me means pyramid. Ri is the sun, like Ra or Re, the sun god. It also means rebirth, which the sun is doing every day. And Ka is the soul. So America means something like the big pyramid where our soul is reborn. Then we have Paris. It comes from Parisis or Par-Isis, the house of Isis. Just like Pharaoh, which comes from Par-A, the big house, which refers to the royal house of the pharaohs. Then we have this word, Aryan. A means big, pregnant. Re is the sun. So Aryans are the ones impregnated by the sun. So they are the descendants of the sun god. Just like in aristocracy, which is the rule of the Aryans, so the nobility, who are the descendants of the sun god. Now we are leaving ancient times and go to the Middle Ages and the knightly orders, for example the Templars. These are the orders founded by the pharaohs. And two central symbols that you will always see are the Knight's Cross and the Maltese Cross. The Knight's Cross is also known as the Templar's Cross or Cross Patée, and the Maltese Cross is also known as the Nobility Cross. Let's begin with the Knight's or Templar's Cross. Here you see the different variations. That is all the same meaning. And the original version is the one on the top left, where it is just 4 triangles. This comes from an unfolded pyramid. If you push on top of a hollow pyramid and you push it to the ground, it leaves this symbol. And the other crosses are just rounded or thin versions of that. Here you can easily see the sides of the pyramid. And this cross is often used as military decoration. Here you can see an iron cross from the German Empire. And here you can see an iron cross at a uniform from the Third Reich. And this is an iron cross from the Second World War. It is also still used as a symbol of the Bundeswehr, the army of current Germany. You also find it on the king of a chess game. And as said before, this is a cross of orders. Here you can see it on the Templars' altar. The Templar Knights were the ones doing the crusades, and this red cross on white ground is a cross derived from the same origin. Here we see it again as the 4 sides of the pyramid. And if we connect the outer edges here and invert the colors, then we come to the other cross, the Maltese cross, or cross of nobility. That is the one that the monarchs are wearing on their uniforms. Here you can see an example. In the corners you see the lilies. This is the same cross that the Hospitalis and the Maltese order are using, of course in white and red. Here we see it as a badge. And here we see it on a cowl. And here you see several badges and decorations of cross patée and nobility cross. Let's have a look at some emperors. This is William II of Germany. You can see the cross of nobility hanging from his neck. And here we have Louis II. He's also wearing the nobility cross and some other decorations. And you can also see the binding on the left and several sun symbols. Then here we have a crucifix. We can see Jesus Christ hanging from a cross. you see a cross pâté in every corner and in the middle. And in the background, in the middle, you see a sun. The minimalistic version of the Templar's cross is a Swiss cross, which is just a plus in red and white. Just like the red cross, which is an inverted version of the Swiss cross. Next, let's take a look at the lion, which equals the Sphinx. The Sphinx is a huge ancient Egyptian stone statue with the body of a lion and the head of a pharaoh. The Sphinx stands for the pharaonic royal family, and the lion is a symbol of royal dignity. The lion is an animal from northern Africa and the Middle East, which never naturally existed in Europe, and this is one symbol that the pharaohs used to recognize each other. For example, the lion is used as a coat of arms in England, and you also see lions on the sides holding an emblem or a coat of arms. You also see the lions used as stone statues, for example at entrances where left and right of the entrance is a sitting lion. Here we see a lion statue in Madrid holding a sphere representing the globe. Here you see a statue with the same motif in St. Augustine. And here we have a lion from Vienna holding a shield or an emblem. And even in East Asia we see lion statues left and right of royal palaces. And next we have the symbol a bud. This can also be a pine cone, I think. And it looks a bit like this. And it means that our seeds are here. So the descendants of the pharaohs are multiplying here. Here you see a couple of examples with this peculiar surface. And the form is a bit like a breakfast egg. Here it is with a pillar and two wings and a sun hieroglyph on top. And this one here you can see in the Vatican. And then the next symbol has a similar meaning. The goblet, or also known as the Holy Grail. The latter has been used in movies a lot, like the Templars searching for the Holy Grail. And the goblet, or the Holy Grail, as a symbol means our blood is here. So quite similar to the bud. Here we see a couple of examples. Now let's look at a couple of remaining symbols. For example, this one. This looks like an upside down V, or like a pyramid without a base. This is also some kind of Templar symbol. Here are a couple of examples. This one has red and white in it. And because of this symbol, the V also stands for the Templars. This is also the reason for Churchill's victory sign. And then we have this symbol. This is the seal of the Templars. It stands for the poverty that the knights and the orders had in the beginning. So you see they're sharing a horse with two people because they were not the ones who became monarchs. Then we have the octagon. An octagon is a polygon with 8 sides. And when you take a Swiss cross and connect the edges, then you get an octagon. And the octagon is a reference to the Templars' chapels, which were always rounded at the end, or to be more precise, had an octagon shape. You can see it here on the draft, and also here in the roof. And this here is a Templar symbol. It looks a bit like a W, but if you look closely it looks more like 2 V's inside of each other, and they form a third V on top. And the V here is said to represent Vav, which is the Hebrew number 6, so that this forms the symbolic number 666. You also find this symbol in the Volkswagen logo and also in the Wikipedia logo. And finally, let's look at the Freemason symbols. And probably the most important Freemason symbol is the isosceles triangle, or the triangle of the Freemasons. In architecture, this often looks like this. This also exists with a circle or eye inside. And also in this form, where the bottom line is missing and goes to the left and the right instead. And this one is also a very famous combination here with the two pillars, referencing the Freemason temple. It's basically the same meaning. So let's look at some examples. Here we see a couple of triangles of the Freemasons at house facades. Here you even have the pyramids as a decoration. Here you see an entire facade with the Freemason triangles. Here you see the one with the pillars. Here's another facade. And here you see them pretty much everywhere on all Freemason buildings, above all windows. And then we have here two triangles of the Freemasons and a halved sun symbol. Here we have the triangle of the Freemasons, and under it you have the binding and also two pillars at the sides. And then here we have a triangle of the Freemasons with the sun inside of it. Here we see the halved sun hieroglyph and the triangle of the Freemasons. And here you can also see that inside the triangle of the Freemasons there's sometimes a gap where they place a certain symbol. This one is probably the Grail. Here we can see a triangle on a door, and below it is the sun hieroglyph and two pillars at the sides. Here we see the triangle of the Freemasons with the bottom side open, and inside of it there's some kind of emblem. And here's another one. And here we see the triangle with the eye inside. And here we see one where inside of the gap there's an obelisk, and the obelisk is wearing the binding. And on top there are also some pyramid decorations. Here you see an open triangle, and on the left and the right you see a world domination symbol. Here you see a grave with the triangle of the Freemasons, the binding and the two pillars. This is still being used even in modern architecture. Here we see an open triangle of the Freemasons at a modern apartment building. Then of course at official buildings of the USA there are always the triangles of the Freemasons and the pillars and also some other symbols. But this architectural symbolism of the secret societies goes far back to the ancient times. Here we see the ancient temple of Isis. You can see the triangle and the pillars. By the way, the triangle of the Freemasons can also be depicted as three dots in this kind of setup. Now let's have a look at two occult symbols. The first one is the pentagram. The pentagram is a five-pointed star where the corner points are connected like shown. You often see it in a circle, or it can be filled, or it can also be upside down. As a visual style, the lines are sometimes overlapping. The points of the pentagram stand for the four elements which together build wisdom, which is the fifth point of the pentagram. You will find the pentagram wherever you look. Here, for example, this is the symbol of the Allies in the Second World War, an encircled pentagram. And at the planes there were these filled out pentagrams with the white and red stripes on the sides. This is the Soviet Navy flag. You see the filled out pentagram in red, and next to it the hammer and sickle for communism, and the white background, and the floor is blue for the water, I guess. And here's the official flag of the Soviet Union in red with a star and the hammer and sickle in gold. And very similar is the Chinese flag of the Communist Party. You see a couple of filled out pentagrams. And then this is the flag of Islam, where you have the half moon and you have a filled out pentagram inside of it. Then this is the American flag. You have these red and white stripes and 50 filled out pentagrams on the blue background. And here you see the flag of North Korea. You see an encircled filled out pentagram in red on white ground with red in the background, and the outside is white and blue. Then here you see upside down pentagrams on a Mormon temple. The upside down pentagram is also often associated with Satanism. And then let's have a look at this here. If you combine the corner points of a pyramid, it will look from the side like a pentagram. And if you do the same thing with a double pyramid, it looks like the Star of David. The Star of David is a combination of two triangles, one pointed upwards, which also means male, and one pointed downwards, which also means female. And combined together, they form wisdom. The sign also symbolizes a part of the tree of life. This 10-point graph by the Cabal, and the corner points each represent one Sephiroth. These are the branches or points of the tree. And the middle is wisdom again. By the way, Ka and Ba of the word Kabar come from Old Egyptian. Ka is the soul of the living, and Ba is the soul of the dead. Here we see the flag of Israel in blue and white with a Star of David in the middle. And here we have a metal casket with a lion on top and the Star of David encircled. And a very common Freemason symbol is square and compasses. This looks like this. Among other things, this again symbolizes the tip upside for male and the tip downside for female, and combined together wisdom. And in the middle of this sign there's often one of two symbols. On the one hand there can be a G. The G stands for Golut or Golat, which is Hebrew and means diaspora, through which the pharaohs spread all over the world. Here we see square and compasses in gold with a G inside a sun and on a checkered floor. A chessboard style checkered floor is something very typical for Freemasons. And then here we have George Washington with a Masonic apron on which you can see square and compasses with the G in the middle, and above that there's a single eye on the apron, and that is the other symbol that is often inside the square and compasses, which is the single eye or the all-seeing eye. Here we see it again, or here inside the G. The all-seeing eye is also often portrayed inside of a pyramid, and it often emits rays like so. Here in architecture, and here from the dollar bill. And here it is inside the Star of David emitting rays. Then next we have the Masonic apron. Freemasons in the rank of a master wear this apron in front of their crotch in ceremonies. On the picture you can see a blue Masonic apron. You can also see 3 dots symbolizing the triangle, which look like little suns. This also says something about the rank of the master. He's also carrying a sword or a dagger with square and compasses on top. And on the left side you see he's holding a human skull, and that also has a symbolic meaning. The Masonic apron can also be red. This also has the 3 dots, and in the bottom you have skull and bones. Basically the Masonic apron looks like an envelope. And Google is using this symbol as a Google Mail icon. And this is not surprising because Google is Freemason. Here's the Masonic G as the Google logo. Here you can see a decorated apron. It has the all-seeing eye with the rays on top. And on the bottom you see square and compasses with a sun inside. Then, as said before, we have the skull, or also skull and bones. This is also the name of a fraternity where George Bush was in. The skull stands for death. It also means memento mori, so remember your mortality, that you have limited time on this earth. And here we see the typical symbol, and underneath you have 322. I don't know what that stands for. Maybe it's a date. If you know what that means, you can write it in the comments. Anyway, the skull, typical Freemason symbol. Here we have a skull ring, and on the forehead you see a sun, and inside of it there's square and compasses and a G. And here we see an ancient Templar's goblet with a skull and a sword. And here we have an SS cap with a eagle with the Egyptian wings, and then the swastika, sun symbol, and the skull and bones. And underneath you have the binding. And then we have the eagle, which equals the phoenix. You often see the eagle as a heraldic animal or on national flags. This, for example, is the Prussian eagle. And here you see the federal eagle of Germany. And here you see the imperial eagle from the Third Reich. And on the right side you see the eagle of the National Socialist Party. You can see here how they are looking into 2 different directions. The direction in which the eagle is looking has a symbolic meaning. Namely, left and right stands for moon and sun, and also female and male, and also will and logic. There are also double-headed eagles that look into both directions. The eagle stands as a symbol for the phoenix. The phoenix is a mythological firebird which burns to ashes and is reborn again from the fire. You might know the idiom rise like a phoenix. And which fire figure is reborn after every cycle? It is the symbol of the sun, which sets and rises again. And then we have the owl. The owl is a symbol of high-degree Freemasons. The owl is also said to have the ability to look inside someone's soul. It's a symbol of psychiatry. Here you see a ring with the owl and the triangle of the Freemasons. At the side you see skull and bones. And you can also see some kind of V at the side. Finally, let's look at some other remaining symbols. There are so many symbols I can't include them all inside one video, and I also don't know all of them. But let's take a look at, for example, Friday the 13th. On Friday the 13th of October 1307, the French king Philip the Fair had the Templars arrested, and that's why it's a fatal day. Then we have the number 33, which stands for the highest rank of Freemasonry in the Scottish Rite. There are also some other scales using letters instead of numbers, But if it's the numbers, then 33 is the highest. The 3 is like a triangle, and if you combine two threes, you have the Star of David. Then we have a white and black checkered chessboard floor. This is very popular with Freemasons. Basically, the chess game symbolizes their strategy. You have the king with the Templar's cross on top, and then you have the knights, and you have the bishops dominating religion, and then you have the castles, so the rooks. And then this is us, the peasants, the pawns, who are occasionally sacrificed. Then the next symbol we have is getting photographed or painted with a hand in your jacket like this. That means they're Freemasons. There you have, for example, Stalin or Marx or Napoleon. That just means they're part of the club. Here we have Frederick Bartholdi. That's the creator of the Statue of Liberty. He was also one of them. And here again you see the tricolor for the three colors of the pharaohs. And you have Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. Again, it stands for the pharaohs should not kill each other because they're brothers. They're all equal. So not only the firstborn gets to rule, and they're all free to get elected king by the minions. And these are the principles of the New World Order, which replace the Old World Order of the monarchs by republics and democracies. And now we come to a very important symbol that I saved for last. I'm afraid the picture is a little blurry and hard to see. This artwork symbolizes the pharaonic world domination strategy of breeding into other peoples and controlling them from within. What you see here is a round metal plate which has the head of Isis in the middle, portrayed as a sunflower, and below her there's a newborn baby representing birth. Remember, Isis is the goddess of birth. And the genetic lines or threads go to the outside like a vortex. This is portrayed as like bundles of naked women going outside into the world. Here in the zoom you can see it more clearly. On the left you have Isis and the child, and on the right you have the women. They have a little crease in the middle from the knees of the women. And this artwork also has a backside, and on the backside in the middle you see the devil, and around the devil you see men at war killing each other. That means that they genetically go into the enemy peoples, crossbreed with them, and take them over, and then organize wars where several enemy peoples fight each other. And if you simplify this symbol, then it looks like the black sun. And if you take a look at the sun symbols all around the world, then you see they look quite similar. You have the sun wheels, you have the sun crosses, and you have these vortexes. The swastika, for example, also exists in Asia. It's also a sun symbol. You see this yin-yang symbol in different variations with these vortexes. And they also share the same kind of symbolism with the moon and the sun, the male and the female parts. This is also the direction of the swastika. It also stands for male, female, sun and moon. Here we see this wheel from Buddhism, and inside is a little vortex. Here we see two golden calves and a sun wheel. Or this symbol here with the sun in the middle, and it goes outside into these swastika patterns. And finally the Google logo, which looks also quite similar. It could be a reference to the black sun. It also has these 3 sixes here, which is another symbol. Finally, let's look at a couple of examples. First, let's take a look at this house here. You see on top there's a triangle of the Freemasons, and below that you have 3 halved sun wheels. To the left and to the right there are a couple of minimalistic sun hieroglyphs depicted as a whole. If you look further below, you have these more modern angled sun hieroglyphs. And at the bottom you see another sun wheel, and left and right another sun hieroglyph. Then we have the quadriga, that is this kind of chariot on the Brandenburg Gate. At the front of the chariot you see the binding, and we see some kind of antique goddess. I think it's the goddess of victory, and she's holding an encircled knight's cross, and on top of it there's an eagle, so like the phoenix, and the eagle is wearing a king's crown. Then the next picture shows the King of the Netherlands in his uniform. Then we have the typical colors here. We have the uniform in blue for the war, and we have white gloves and a red belt and collar and so on. And the rest is in gold. Gold is the color of the sun. Then we have the eagle, which has again these Egyptian looking wings. And behind the eagle is a kind of sun symbol. As a decoration here you see the cross of nobility, and also different variations of the knight's cross. And then let's take a look at this picture. This is Edward VII. And what kind of symbols can we see here? He has a staff with a crown, and on top of it is a knight's cross. Then the clothes he's wearing are in white and red, and he's wearing a blue sash. The rest is in gold, the color of the sun. Then on his shoulder you can see the binding. Around his neck he's wearing a cross of nobility, and he has several sun symbols on his chest. And under his hand you can see another cross of nobility. Most of the information in this video is based on the analysis of historian Dr. Sean Ross, who very directly confronted these people and as a punishment was kidnapped and tortured. I thank him for his work in exposing the truth. If you know more about the symbols, or if you know more important symbols like angels, elements and so on, or if you have a correction or an addition, then please write it in the comments. Please download and spread this video. Thank you for watching.